I am Naomi, 32 years old, and until recently, I thought I had built a perfect life with my husband David and our 5-year-old daughter Emma. We had a beautiful home, successful careers, and love that I believed could withstand anything. But there was one obstacle I never saw coming. My mother-in-law, Patricia's obsession with David's ex-girlfriend Stephanie, has turned my life into a daily battle for respect boundaries and my own marriage. What began with subtle comparisons has escalated into Patricia calling me a placeholder and even trying to take my daughter. Before we continue, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. If this story resonates with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to join our community of real-life stories. I promise the ending will give you something to think about. I met David 5 years ago when he was a medical sales representative visiting the pediatric ward where I work as a nurse. Our connection was immediate and unlike anything I had experienced before. His warm brown eyes and genuine interest in my work drew me in, but it was his kindness toward my young patients that truly captured my heart. After our third date, I knew he was someone special when he brought homemade chicken soup to my apartment when I called in sick with the flu. Despite our different backgrounds, we shared core values about family hard work and building a future together. David grew up in a small town with just his mother Patricia after losing his father to a heart attack when he was only 12. I came from a larger family in the suburbs with both parents still happily married. Our differences never seemed to matter much as we built our relationship on mutual respect and open communication. Before meeting me, David had been in a serious 2-year relationship with a woman named Stephanie. They had dated through his final years of college and into his early career before breaking up amicably about a year before we met. According to David, they simply wanted different things. Stephanie was eager to settle down in his hometown, while David wanted to explore opportunities in the city. There were no dramatic fights or betrayals, just two people recognizing they had different paths ahead. When David first introduced me to Patricia, she was polite but somewhat reserved. At 62, she was an elegant woman with perfectly styled silver hair and a home filled with family photos. I noticed immediately that several pictures of David and Stephanie remained prominently displayed, but I didn't think much of it at the time. After all, Stephanie had been part of their lives for years. I genuinely tried to build a relationship with Patricia. I asked about family recipes, listened to stories about David's childhood, and always brought thoughtful gifts when we visited. In those early days, Patricia would occasionally mention Stephanie in conversation, usually in the context of reminiscing about past family events. Stephanie always loved my peach cobbler, she might say while serving dessert. Or, "This reminds me of the time Stephanie and David went hiking on the mountain trail." These comments were frequent enough to notice, but spaced out enough that mentioning them seemed petty. David would sometimes give me an apologetic glance, but never addressed it directly. I later learned that his relationship with his mother was complicated by his early loss of his father. Patricia had poured all her attention and affection into her only child, and David had grown accustomed to accommodating her quirks to keep the peace. As our relationship progressed and we became engaged, Patricia's warmth toward me noticeably cooled. What had been polite interest became barely concealed indifference. She would ask perfunctory questions about my day, but never seemed to listen to the answers. When we announced our engagement, her response was a tight smile and a comment about how sudden it seemed despite us having dated for nearly 18 months. The wedding planning brought more tension. Patricia had strong opinions about everything from the venue to the flowers, often prefacing her suggestions with, "Stephanie always dreamed of." When I chose a simple A-line dress instead of the princess style she preferred, Patricia sighed and said, "Well, I suppose it suits you, even if it's not what I pictured for my son's bride." Despite these undercurrents, I believed having our daughter Emma would bring us closer as a family. The first year of Emma's life did seem to thaw Patricia's attitude somewhat. She was a doting grandmother who brought handmade baby clothes and offered to babysit so David and I could have occasional date nights. I began to hope that perhaps the early attention had been my imagination, or simply Patricia adjusting to her son's new life. That hope was shattered at Emma's first birthday party. I had spent weeks planning a small but special celebration with close friends and family. As I was arranging the cake for photos, the doorbell rang. David answered it and returned with Patricia, who was accompanied by a tall blonde woman I didn't immediately recognize. It was only when Patricia introduced her with obvious delights, "You remember Stephanie, of course," that I realized my mother-in-law had brought my husband's ex-girlfriend to our daughter's birthday party without warning anyone. The room grew awkwardly quiet as everyone processed this unusual situation. Stephanie herself looked uncomfortable, offering a small wave and whispering what seemed like an apology as she placed a gift on the table. Throughout the party, Patricia kept Stephanie close, loudly reminiscing about what might have been while shooting meaningful glances my way. When I questioned David about it later that night, he sighed deeply. Mom and Stephanie stayed close after the breakup. Stephanie's parents moved away, so Mom sort of adopted her. I didn't know she was bringing her today. I'm sorry if it was uncomfortable. His explanation seemed reasonable on the surface, but something about the situation felt deeply wrong. Little did I know this was just the beginning of a pattern that would threaten everything we had built together. By our second wedding anniversary, Patricia's behavior toward me had transformed from merely cold to actively undermining. What had started as occasional comparisons evolved into constant criticism, thinly veiled as helpful advice. Stephanie always made her pasta sauce from scratch, Patricia would comment, while watching me use store-bought sauce for a quick weeknight dinner. Stephanie kept such an organized home, she would remark when spotting toys in our living room, despite the fact that we had a young child. Stephanie would have had David's shirts ironed by now. She would observe, ignoring that both David and I worked full-time while raising our daughter. Family dinners became particularly tense exercises. Patricia would often accidentally set an extra place at the table, and when questioned would say with exaggerated innocence, "Oh, I was thinking Stephanie might join us. Old habits, I suppose." These accidents happened with such regularity that they could hardly be considered mistakes. David's response to his mother's behavior was perhaps the most frustrating aspect of all. He would give me sympathetic looks or occasionally tell his mother, "That's enough, Mum," but never confronted the real issue. When I brought it up privately, he would minimize the situation. "That's just how Mom is. She doesn't mean anything by it. She's from a different generation. She'll come around eventually. You're reading too much into innocent comments." His dismissal of my concerns only added to my growing sense of isolation. I began to wonder if I was overreacting, if perhaps I was being too sensitive about what David considered harmless eccentricity in his mother. My doubts were confirmed one afternoon when I arrived early to pick up Emma from Patricia's house, where she had been babysitting. Through the partially open door, I heard Patricia's voice on the phone. "Yes, Stephanie, you should definitely come to the family reunion next month. Everyone asks about you, you know. No, Naomi will be there, but don't worry about that. It's important for Emma to know the people who matter in her life." I stood frozen keys in hand as Patricia continued. "David misses you, I can tell. He's just too loyal to admit it. Some marriages are just temporary arrangements until people find their way back to where they belong." I quietly retreated to my car, my hands shaking as I processed what I'd heard. This wasn't just a case of a mother-in-law who couldn't let go of her son's past. Patricia was actively working to undermine my marriage and place in my own family. The situation worsened when I discovered Patricia showing Emma photos of Stephanie, telling my then 3-year-old daughter, "This is Stephanie. She could have been your mummy. Wouldn't that have been nice?" When I confronted Patricia about this inappropriate behavior, she dismissed my concerns entirely. "I'm simply making sure Emma knows all the important people in her family's life. Stephanie has been part of our family for years. You wouldn't want Emma to grow up not knowing her history, would you?" I brought this incident up to David, expecting him to finally see the problem for what it was. Instead, he suggested I had misunderstood the situation. "Mum probably meant it innocently," he said, rubbing his temples. "She's been lonely since Dad died, and Stephanie filled a daughter role for her for a long time. She's telling our daughter that another woman should have been her mother." I said, my voice rising with frustration. "How is that innocent?" "Let's not make this bigger than it is," David replied. "Mum loves Emma. She wouldn't do anything to hurt her." This pattern of dismissal created a growing distance between David and me. What had once been a strong partnership began to feel like I was fighting a battle alone. I found myself second-guessing my reactions, wondering if I was being unreasonable, even as Patricia's behavior grew increasingly blatant. The situation came to a head that Christmas, when Patricia presented David with a lovingly wrapped gift. As he opened it, his expression shifted from anticipation to discomfort. Inside was a carefully crafted photo album chronicling his relationship with Stephanie. Beach trips, family gatherings, cozy holiday moments, all preserved and presented as if celebrating a continuing romance rather than a relationship that had ended years ago. "I thought you might want to remember the good times," Patricia said with a meaningful look. "Some connections never really end, do they?" That night after Emma was asleep, I finally broke down. Through tears of frustration and hurt, I told David that I couldn't continue to be treated like an unwelcome guest in my own marriage. "I feel like I'm competing with a ghost," I sobbed. Except Stephanie isn't a ghost. Your mother keeps her so present in our lives that sometimes it feels like she's more your wife than I am." David held me close, promising that he would speak with his mother and make it clear that her behavior needed to change. I wanted to believe him, but the conversation seemed to have no effect on Patricia. If anything, her campaign against me only became more overt and more social. As Patricia realized that her private undermining wasn't achieving her goals, she began to expand her efforts into our social circle. What had once been confined to family dinners now spilled into every social interaction, creating a widening circle of discomfort and embarrassment. At extended family gatherings, Patricia made a point of introducing Stephanie as the one who got away, whenever she managed to include her. She would arrange seating to separate me from David, often placing Stephanie near him, while relegating me to the far end of tables or different rooms entirely. Family photos, Patricia would announce at these gatherings, then deliberately organize them to exclude me. "Just the original family first," she would say, pulling Stephanie into the frame, while I stood awkwardly aside holding Emma, who would inevitably be included while I was not. Patricia's social media became another battleground. Her Facebook page featured numerous photos of family events, where Stephanie was prominently featured, often with captions like, "Family is who you choose," or "Some bonds can never be broken." Conspicuously absent were photos that included me despite my presence at many of these same events. More disturbing was my gradual discovery that Patricia had been crafting a narrative among our neighbours and community. At a neighbourhood barbecue, a woman I barely knew approached me with sympathy in her eyes. "It must be so difficult knowing you're just temporary," she said, patting my arm. Patricia explained the whole situation, "But you're handling it with such grace." Confused, I asked what she meant. "Well, about David and Stephanie eventually getting back together. Patricia said it's just a matter of time, but that you're aware of the arrangement. I think it's very modern of you all." I was stunned into silence. Patricia had apparently been telling people that my marriage was some kind of placeholder arrangement, until David and Stephanie reconciled. The humiliation was compounded by the realization that people had been discussing this behind my back for who knows how long. Even Stephanie herself seemed increasingly uncomfortable with the situation. At one family event, where Patricia had insisted she attend, I noticed Stephanie trying to maintain distance from David, looking embarrassed whenever Patricia made one of her pointed comments. During a rare moment alone in the kitchen, Stephanie approached me. "I want you to know I've tried to pull back from all this," she said quietly, glancing toward the door to ensure we weren't overheard. "Patricia keeps insisting I come to things. I've told her David and I are in the past, but she doesn't listen." While I appreciated Stephanie's acknowledgement, it did little to resolve the situation. Patricia's campaign continued unabated, and if anything, Stephanie's reluctance only made Patricia more determined. My friends began to notice the strange dynamic as well. After witnessing Patricia's behaviour at Emma's 4th birthday party, my closest friend Jordan pulled me aside. "What's going on with David's mum?" she asked bluntly. "The way she talks about you, it's like you're invisible. And why is his ex at your kid's birthday party?" When I explained the ongoing situation, Jordan's expression shifted from confusion to concern. "Naomi, that's not normal. That's emotional abuse. Does David see what she's doing?" I had no good answer. David continued to minimize the situation, suggesting that ignoring Patricia's behavior was the best way to handle it. "She's getting older," he would say. "She's set in her ways, it doesn't mean anything." But the evidence continued to mount that Patricia's behavior was both intentional and potentially dangerous to our marriage. David's cousin Michael approached me at a family reunion speaking in hushed tones. "You should know this isn't the first time Aunt Patricia has done this," he revealed. David's college girlfriend before Stephanie got the same treatment. Patricia decided she wasn't good enough and systematically pushed her out. When Stephanie came along, suddenly she was perfect. Now the cycle's repeating with you. This information added a new dimension to my understanding. Patricia wasn't just unreasonably attached to Stephanie. She had a pattern of controlling her son's relationships according to her own preferences. Somehow I had fallen on the wrong side of her approval. The situation deteriorated further when I discovered through mutual acquaintances that Patricia had been telling family members that I had trapped David with my pregnancy, despite the fact that we had been married for nearly a year before conceiving Emma. According to Patricia's revisionist history, David had been on the verge of reconciling with Stephanie when I announced my pregnancy, forcing him to do the right thing by marrying me. The cumulative effect of these discoveries was a growing sense of isolation. I became anxious about attending family gatherings, knowing I would face subtle and not so subtle hostility. David, in his effort to keep the peace, often left me to navigate these difficult interactions alone, sometimes literally as he was pulled away by his mother, to attend to other guests or family members, leaving me stranded among people who had been fed a false narrative about my marriage. "Just ignore it," became David's mantra. "She can't actually change anything between us." But as Patricia's campaign continued, I couldn't help wondering if that was true. The constant pressure was creating cracks in our relationship. We argued more frequently often about Patricia, but increasingly about other things as well. The foundation of trust that had made our marriage strong was eroding under the constant assault. Something had to change, but I had no idea that change would come in such a dramatic and public fashion. Patricia's 65th birthday party became the unexpected turning point in our family drama. David had insisted we attend despite my reservations, arguing that missing his mother's milestone birthday would only escalate tensions. In retrospect, perhaps escalation was inevitable, regardless of our choices. Patricia had chosen an upscale restaurant for her celebration with about 30 guests, including extended family and longtime friends. When we arrived, I immediately noticed the elaborate seating arrangement. Patricia sat at the head of the main table with David positioned to her right. On Patricia's left, in what would traditionally be considered the place of honor for a daughter-in-law, sat Stephanie, looking uncomfortable but present nonetheless. My assigned seat was at a secondary table with people introduced as Patricia's Bridge Club friends, while Emma was placed next to David at the main family table. The message couldn't have been clearer if Patricia had spelled it out. Stephanie belonged with the family. I did not. Throughout the meal, Patricia made a point of highlighting Stephanie's every attribute. "Stephanie just got promoted at her firm," she announced to the table. "Always knew she was destined for great things." Or, "Stephanie helped me pick out this dress. She has such exceptional taste." I maintained a tight smile, focusing on Emma and making polite conversation with the perfectly nice but confused Bridge Club ladies, who clearly had no idea why I wasn't sitting with my husband. The situation escalated dramatically when Patricia stood to give a speech after the main course. She thanked everyone for coming, spoke about how blessed she felt at 65 to be surrounded by loved ones, and then turned the conversation in an unexpected direction. "I'm especially grateful to have my dear Stephanie here today," she said, her voice thick with emotion as she clasped Stephanie's hand. "You have been the daughter I never had, but always wanted. Everyone here knows how special you are to this family." The room grew uncomfortably quiet as Patricia continued her filter, apparently dissolved by emotion and perhaps one too many glasses of champagne. "Some of you might not understand the special bond our family shares with Stephanie. You might wonder why she's still such an important part of our lives." Patricia's gaze fixed on me with undisguised hostility. But true love and true family connections can never be replaced by temporary arrangements. A few uncomfortable coughs sounded around the room. Stephanie's face had gone scarlet with embarrassment. "I always knew David and Stephanie were meant to be together." Patricia continued, either oblivious to or enjoying the discomfort she was creating. "Sometimes life takes detours, but I believe in my heart that what's meant to be will find its way eventually." It was then that Patricia made the statement that would finally break through David's willful blindness. "I want to thank those of you who have supported our family through this difficult time," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the mortified silence. "It's not easy watching my son being kept from his true love, but patience is a virtue, and some things are worth waiting for." I felt as though all the oxygen had been sucked from the room. Around me, people shifted uncomfortably, some staring at their plates, others darting glances between me, David, and Stephanie. Emma, too young to fully understand, but old enough to sense tension, pressed closer to her father's side. For the first time, I saw David truly see what was happening. His face flushed with a combination of embarrassment and anger as he stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Mom, that's enough," he said firmly. "You're embarrassing yourself and everyone here." Patricia looked genuinely shocked at being challenged. "I'm only speaking the truth, darling. Everyone knows Naomi is just a peel—" "Don't say it." David cut her off, his voice sharp enough to make Patricia flinch. "Don't you dare finish that sentence." The tension in the room was palpable as mother and son stared at each other. Patricia recovered quickly, forcing a laugh. "Oh, David's always so protective," she said to the room at large. "But families should be honest with each other, shouldn't they?" "Yes, they should," David replied, his gaze not wavering. "So let me be honest. Naomi is my wife, the only woman I want to be with. and if you can't respect that respect her, then we have a serious problem. Patricia's face hardened. You don't mean that. You're just confused. Stephanie is the one you were supposed to... I'm not confused, David interrupted again, his patience clearly gone. And Stephanie and I broke up years ago by mutual choice. This fantasy you've created needs to stop. With that, David took Emma's hand and walked around the table to where I sat stunned by his sudden and public defense. He extended his hand to me. I think it's time we left. As we gathered our things, Stephanie herself stood up. I think I should go too, she said quietly. This isn't right. Patricia's expression was one of betrayal as her carefully orchestrated scenario collapsed around her. Stephanie, you know this isn't... No, Patricia, Stephanie cut in with unexpected firmness. This has gone too far. I've told you repeatedly that David and I are in the past. What you're doing isn't fair to anyone, especially not to Naomi and Emma. As we made our way toward the exit, Stephanie caught up with us in the restaurant lobby. Naomi, can I talk to you for a minute? She asked hesitantly. With David's encouraging nod, I stepped aside with her while he took Emma to the car. I need to apologize, Stephanie said once we were alone. I should have put a stop to this a long time ago. Patricia has been manipulating all of us, and I let it happen because it seemed easier than confronting her. What do you mean manipulating all of us? I asked. Stephanie sighed heavily. Those chance meetings over the years weren't chance at all. Patricia has been orchestrating everything. She calls me constantly, insists I attend family functions, tells me David misses me. For a while I thought maybe it was just a lonely woman who saw me as a daughter figure, but it's become something much more unhealthy. This confirmation of what I had suspected brought both validation and renewed anger. Why didn't you say something sooner? I tried pulling back, but Patricia would show up at my workplace, call my parents, even threatened to tell people I had hurt her if I abandoned her. Stephanie looked genuinely distressed. I should have been stronger about it, and I'm truly sorry for any pain this has caused you. Our conversation was brief but revelatory. By the time I joined David and Emma in the car, my emotions were a complex mix of vindication, anger, and determination. The drive home was initially silent, Emma having fallen asleep in her car seat. When we were about halfway home, David spoke. I'm sorry, he said simply, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. I should have shut this down years ago. I just didn't want to see it. Why not? I asked the question that had been burning inside me for years. Why was it so hard to see what she was doing? David was quiet for a long moment. When Dad died, Mum fell apart. I was 12, trying to figure out how to exist in a world without my father, while also taking care of her. Somewhere along the way, I learned that keeping Mum happy was my job. It became automatic to excuse her behaviour, to work around her moods, to pretend problems weren't there. He glanced at me briefly before returning his eyes to the road. But that doesn't excuse it. What happened tonight made me see that I've been failing you by trying not to fail her. And that's not the husband or father I want to be. For the first time in years, I felt like my husband was truly seeing the situation clearly. The question was whether this clarity had come too late. 3 weeks after Patricia's birthday disaster, I was in the middle of a staff meeting at the pediatric ward when my phone vibrated with an urgent call from Emma's school. My heart raced as I excused myself to answer. Mrs. Cohen, this is Meredith Jenkins, the principal at Oak Ridge Elementary, said the tense voice on the other end of the line. There's been an incident involving your daughter and her grandmother. Is Emma okay? I asked immediately, already grabbing my purse and signaling to my supervisor that I needed to leave. Emma is fine and still here at school, Principal Jenkins assured me. But I need you to come right away. Mrs. Patricia Cohen attempted to remove Emma from school without authorization, claiming there was a family emergency. My blood ran cold. I'm on my way. Please don't let Emma leave with anyone but me or my husband. Of course not. Our security protocols prevented Mrs. Cohen from taking Emma, but she was quite insistent and upset Emma in the process. I broke every speed limit driving to the school, my mind racing with horrific scenarios. When I arrived, I was escorted immediately to the principal's office, where Emma sat on a small chair, her eyes red from crying, but otherwise appearing physically unharmed. "Mommy!" she cried out when she saw me running into my arms. I held her tightly, my heart still pounding with adrenaline and fear. "What happened, sweetie?" I asked gently, brushing her hair back from her tear-stained face. "Grandma came to school and said we were going on a surprise trip to see her special friend," Emma hiccuped. "But Mrs. Jenkins said I couldn't go without you saying it was okay, and Grandma got really mad and started yelling. Principal Jenkins cleared her throat. Mrs. Cohen told our front office staff that there was a family emergency and she needed to take Emma immediately. When asked for identification and checked against our approved pickup list, she became agitated. She told our staff she was taking Emma to see her real family and that it was, quote, none of their business. The principal's expression was grave as she continued. When our staff explained they couldn't release Emma without proper authorization, Mrs. Cohen attempted to walk past them to Emma's classroom. Security had to intervene. Where is Patricia now? I asked, still holding Emma protectively. She left after security made it clear she would not be taking Emma. She was quite upset, threatening to call the police and claiming we were keeping her granddaughter from her family. Principal Jenkins slid a form across her desk. Given the circumstances, I would suggest updating your approved pickup list and possibly considering a formal restraining order if you believe your mother-in-law poses a safety risk. The weight of that suggestion settled heavily on my shoulders. I had known Patricia's behavior was troubling, but hearing a school administrator suggest a restraining order brought home just how serious the situation had become. We have security footage of the incident if you need it for legal purposes, Principal Jenkins added. After reviewing and restricting the pickup list to only David and myself, I took Emma home, calling David on the way to explain what had happened. His reaction was immediate and intense. She did what? He exploded when I told him. Where was she planning to take Emma? According to Emma, to see her special friend, I replied, keeping my voice calm for Emma's sake, despite my internal turmoil. Stephanie, David said flatly. She was taking our daughter to see Stephanie. When David arrived home early from work, his face was ashen with a combination of anger and fear. He sat with Emma, reassuring her that she had done the right thing by staying at school, while gently asking for more details about what Grandma had said. Grandma said we were going to visit someone who was supposed to be my real mummy. Emma revealed her innocent repetition of Patricia's words landing like a physical blow. I told her, "You're my real mummy," and she said I was confused. David's expression hardened as Emma spoke, his jaw clenching visibly. After Emma had been settled with her favourite cartoon and a snack, we retreated to the kitchen to speak privately. This crosses every line, David said, his voice low and shaking with controlled rage. Trying to take our daughter from school without permission, telling her you're not her real mother. This isn't just inappropriate anymore, Naomi. It's dangerous. For the first time, I saw no trace of hesitation or excuses in my husband's demeanour. The protective father had fully overridden the dutiful son. What do we do? I asked, still processing the school principal's suggestion of a restraining order. First, we make sure Emma is safe. From now on, my mother has zero unsupervised contact with her, David stated firmly. And we need to be clear with the school that under no circumstances is Emma to leave with anyone but you or me, no matter what story they're told. He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture of frustration I knew well. Then I need to have a very direct conversation with my mother about boundaries and consequences. David called Patricia that evening, putting the phone on speaker so I could hear. Her initial response was defensive indignation. I don't understand why everyone's overreacting, she huffed. I just wanted to take Emma for ice cream and to visit with Stephanie. There's nothing sinister about that. You tried to remove our daughter from school without permission, telling staff there was an emergency, David replied, his voice controlled but firm. You told our 5-year-old that her mother isn't her real mother. How exactly is that not sinister? Emma deserves to know her family, Patricia insisted. Stephanie would have been her mother if things had gone the way they were supposed to. I'm just trying to give her a sense of her real history. Stephanie is not Emma's mother, David stated flatly. Naomi is, and the only history you're creating is one where Emma can't trust her grandmother not to lie and manipulate her. Patricia's tone shifted to wounded martyrdom. You've changed David. Ever since she came into your life, you've pulled away from your real family, from people who truly love you. Mom, David said, his patience clearly wearing thin, Naomi and Emma are my real family. If you can't accept that, can't respect my wife and my choices, then we have a serious problem. Are you choosing her over your own mother? Patricia's voice rose with incredulous anger. I'm choosing my daughter's safety and my wife's dignity, David replied without hesitation. And yes, if you force me to make that choice, I will choose them every time. The call ended with Patricia in tears, claiming we were cruel to isolate her from her only grandchild, and David firmly stating that her access to Emma would depend entirely on her ability to respect our boundaries. After hanging up, David looked both exhausted and resolved. I should have done that years ago, he said quietly. I just never thought she'd go this far. As we sat together processing the day's events, one thing became crystal clear. Patricia's behaviour had escalated beyond mere preference for Stephanie into something potentially harmful to our daughter. Whatever happened next, our priority had to be protecting Emma from her grandmother's dangerous delusions. In the days following the school incident, David and I agreed that professional help was necessary for navigating the complex family dynamics we faced. We scheduled an appointment with Dr. Eleanor Matthews, a family therapist specializing in toxic family relationships. Dr. Matthews listened intently as we described the history of Patricia's behavior, her obsession with Stephanie, and the recent escalation at Emma's school. When we finished, she leaned forward, her expression serious. What you're describing goes beyond typical difficult in-law dynamics, she explained. Patricia's inability to accept reality, her manipulation of multiple people, including your daughter, and her escalating boundary violations suggest there may be deeper psychological issues at play. The therapist's validation of our concerns was both vindicating and sobering. Based on what you've described, Patricia may benefit from a formal mental health evaluation, Dr. Matthews continued. Her fixation on your husband's previous relationship and inability to accept its end, despite years of evidence to the contrary, indicates possible delusional thinking. Dr. Matthews helped us formulate a clear boundary plan, emphasizing that Patricia's access to Emma should remain completely supervised until we could be confident in her ability to respect appropriate boundaries. She also suggested that David might need to temporarily limit contact with his mother to underscore the seriousness of the situation. Setting boundaries isn't punishing your mother, Dr. Matthews assured David, who still struggled with guilt despite his determination to protect our family. It's establishing the conditions under which a healthy relationship might eventually be possible. Armed with professional guidance and renewed determination, David made the difficult decision to inform Patricia that we would be taking a step back from contact until she sought help for her behaviour. We composed a clear, compassionate email outlining our concerns, our love for her, and our hopes for healthier family relationships in the future. Patricia's response came 3 days later, not via email or phone, but in person. We were having a quiet Saturday morning at home when the doorbell rang insistently. Looking through the peephole, I was shocked to see not only Patricia, but an older couple I didn't recognize standing on our porch. David, I called softly, not opening the door. Your mother is here with some people. David came to the door, his expression hardening as he looked out. Those are Stephanie's parents, he said in disbelief. What on earth is she doing? When David carefully opened the door, Patricia immediately launched into what felt like a rehearsed speech. David, we're here because we're concerned about you. She began, her voice trembling with what seemed like practiced emotion. This has gone on long enough. Your real family is here to help you see reason. Stephanie's parents looked deeply uncomfortable, the husband shifting his weight anxiously, while the wife attempted a weak smile. Mom, this is inappropriate, David said firmly. We made our position clear in our email. If you want to talk, we can schedule a time, but showing up unannounced with Stephanie's parents is not acceptable. They're here because they care about you, Patricia insisted. Everyone can see that you've been pulled away from where you belong, from who you belong with. Before David could respond, a car pulled up to the curb, and to our further amazement, Stephanie herself emerged looking mortified as she hurried toward the porch. Patricia, I told you not to do this, she said, her voice tight with embarrassment. Mum, Dad, I explained that this wasn't appropriate. Stephanie? Patricia's face lit up with inappropriate joy. You came. Now David will see that we're all united in supporting him. The absurdity of the situation might have been comical if it weren't so disturbing. Here was my husband's ex-girlfriend arriving to apparently stop her own parents from participating in some kind of bizarre intervention organised by my delusional mother-in-law. I came to stop this, not participate in it, Stephanie clarified, turning to us with genuine distress in her expression. I am so sorry. When my parents called saying Patricia had convinced them there was a family emergency involving me and David, I knew I had to intervene. David took a deep breath, visibly struggling to maintain his composure. Everyone except my mother needs to leave. Now. Stephanie nodded quickly, guiding her bewildered parents back to her car with hushed explanations. Once they had departed, David turned to his mother, who stood defiant despite her failed plan. What exactly were you trying to accomplish here? He asked, his voice dangerously quiet. I'm trying to save our family, Patricia insisted. To help you see that you're throwing away your real chance at happiness with someone who truly fits with us. There is no us in my marriage, David replied firmly. My relationship with Naomi isn't subject to family approval or voting, and Stephanie has made it abundantly clear she doesn't want any part of this fantasy you've created. Patricia's expression hardened, her momentary vulnerability replaced by cold accusation. She's turned you against me, against everyone who truly loves you. She's a placeholder, David, nothing more. Everyone can see it but you. The word placeholder hung in the air between us. The insult Patricia had been implying for years finally spoken aloud in our home in front of our daughter, who had appeared silently in the hallway behind us. "Grandma, why are you being mean to Mommy?" Emma's small voice broke the tension, her confusion evident as she clutched her stuffed rabbit. Patricia's face transformed at the sight of Emma softening into a grandmother's smile that seemed disconnected from the venomous words she'd spoken moments before. "Oh, sweetheart, I'm not being mean. I'm trying to help your daddy remember who his real family is." "That's enough!" David's voice rose for the first time, startling all of us. "Emma, honey, go to your room for a minute. Mommy will be there soon." As Emma retreated, David turned back to his mother. "You need to leave, now, and you are not welcome in our home or around our daughter until you get professional help and demonstrate that you can respect my marriage and my family." "You can't keep me from my granddaughter." Patricia's voice took on a threatening edge. "I have rights." "Actually, we can," I interjected, finding my voice despite the shock of the situation. "Especially after you attempted to remove her from school without permission. That's not a grandmother's right, it's potentially criminal." "Total?" Patricia's face crumpled momentarily before hardening again. "This isn't over. You can't keep a family apart forever." "My family is right here," David responded, putting his arm around me, "and I will protect them even from you." After Patricia finally left, following several more minutes of escalating threats and accusations, David and I sat in stunned silence in our living room. The confrontation had been worse than we'd anticipated, revealing the depth of Patricia's delusion and her willingness to involve others in her campaign. "I think we need to talk about that restraining order," David said quietly, the pain evident in his voice despite his resolve. When Patricia returned twice more that week, once late at night, pounding on our door and demanding to see Emma, and once approaching Emma at the neighborhood park where a babysitter had taken her, we made the difficult decision to pursue legal protection. The process was painful, involving detailed documentation of Patricia's escalating behavior and the school incident. The hardest part was the division it created among extended family. Some relatives supported our decision, having witnessed Patricia's behavior firsthand at her birthday party. Others, who had only heard Patricia's version of events, accused us of cruelly separating a grandmother from her grandchild over minor disagreements. Stephanie's complete withdrawal from the situation provided unexpected clarity. She sent a brief formal email to both Patricia and us stating that she wanted no further contact with Patricia and would support any legal measures we needed to take to protect our family, including providing a statement about Patricia's manipulation and increasingly erratic behavior. The journey to establishing firm boundaries with Patricia was possibly the most difficult challenge our marriage had faced. Yet as painful as it was, it also forced David to confront patterns of enabling and avoidance that had shaped his relationship with his mother since childhood, bringing a new depth of understanding between us as we navigated these troubled waters together. 6 months after obtaining the temporary restraining order against Patricia, our family had begun the slow process of healing. The initial weeks had been particularly difficult, with Patricia testing the boundaries of the legal order through messages delivered via third parties and coincidental appearances in places she knew we frequented. But as time passed and our resolve remained firm, a fragile new normal began to emerge. David and I continued our weekly sessions with Dr. Matthews, working through the complex emotions triggered by the family fracture. For David, this meant confronting decades of conditioned responses to his mother's manipulation. "I keep having this recurring dream," he shared during one session. "I'm trying to build a sandcastle with Emma at the beach, and my mother keeps pouring water on it, washing it away. I rebuild, she destroys. But I never stop her or move to a different spot. I just keep rebuilding in the same place, expecting different results." Dr. Matthews nodded. "That's a powerful metaphor for the pattern you're working to break. You've been trained since childhood to accommodate destructive behavior rather than set boundaries against it. For me, therapy involved processing the anger and hurt of years spent being undermined in my own marriage and family. Sometimes I'm still angry at David for not seeing it sooner. I admitted during one particularly emotional session, I feel like I lost years of what should have been simple family happiness because he couldn't stand up to his mother. These honest conversations, painful as they were, laid the groundwork for stronger understanding between us. David's willingness to acknowledge his role in enabling his mother's behavior helped me move toward forgiveness, while my recognition of the complex dynamics that had shaped his responses helped him forgive himself. Emma's sessions with child psychologist Dr. Renee Wilson proved equally valuable. Through play therapy and age-appropriate discussions, Emma processed her confusion about her grandmother's behavior and the sudden change in family contact. Emma is remarkably resilient, Dr. Wilson assured us during a parent consultation. She understands at a basic level that Grandma was not behaving appropriately, and that's why she can't see her right now. Most importantly, she feels secure in your protection and love. After 3 months of therapy and strict separation, Patricia reluctantly agreed to undergo a psychological evaluation as a condition for potentially modifying the restraining order. The results confirmed Dr. Matthews' suspicions about underlying mental health issues with the psychiatrist, diagnosing elements of delusional disorder and narcissistic personality traits. Patricia began treatment initially resistant, but gradually accepting the necessity as she realized this was the only path to regaining contact with David and Emma. Our first supervised visit occurred in the neutral setting of Dr. Matthews' office, 6 months after the restraining order was implemented. Patricia arrived looking older and somewhat diminished, the defiance that had characterized our last encounters replaced by a cautious wariness. The session was structured with clear guidelines, no discussion of Stephanie, no undermining comments about our marriage, and no promises to Emma about future arrangements. Patricia adhered to these rules, though we could see the effort it required when certain topics arose. "I've been taking my medication regularly," she told David during a moment when Emma was engaged with toys in the office's play corner. "The doctor says it helps with confused thinking." Her reluctant acknowledgement of her mental health issues represented significant progress, though Dr. Matthews later cautioned us against expecting too rapid a transformation. "Recovery from delusion is a long road," she explained. "Patricia may always struggle with these tendencies, but with proper treatment, she can learn to recognize and manage them." Subsequent supervised visits followed a similar pattern of cautious interaction. Patricia would occasionally test boundaries with subtle comments, but would back down when gently redirected. Emma, with the resilience of childhood, adjusted to the new arrangement, accepting that seeing Grandma now meant special visits with other adults present. The extended family gradually realigned as the truth of the situation became clearer. Patricia's sister Janet, who had initially been among her strongest defenders, became an unexpected ally after witnessing one of Patricia's therapy sessions. "I had no idea how deep this went," Janet confided to David after driving Patricia home from treatment. "Looking back, I can see the signs were there for years. I'm sorry I didn't support you sooner." Stephanie moved across the country for a job opportunity, a development that seemed to help Patricia accept the finality of that chapter. In her more lucid moments, Patricia acknowledged that she had placed Stephanie in an impossible position and expressed remorse for involving her so deeply in family matters. Our first holiday season under the new arrangement tested everyone's adaptation to changed circumstances. Rather than the traditional Christmas Eve dinner at Patricia's house, we hosted a small gathering at our home with Janet and her family, while Patricia spent the evening with her brother's family. Christmas Day included a 2-hour supervised visit with Patricia, bringing carefully selected gifts for Emma that had been pre-approved by us, a helpful boundary that prevented any inappropriate messages or undermining presents. For our own relationship, the resolution of the Patricia situation, while ongoing and imperfect, allowed us to rediscover aspects of our connection that had been overshadowed by external stress. Date nights became genuinely relaxing rather than opportunities to decompress from family tension. We found ourselves laughing more, arguing less, and approaching parenting decisions as the united team we had always aspired to be. "I never realized how much energy I was spending managing my mother's behavior," David reflected one evening as we sat on our porch after Emma had gone to bed. "It's like I've put down a heavy backpack I didn't even know I was carrying." The journey toward healing was not linear. There were setbacks like the day Patricia brought a photo album to a supervised visit that, while not including Stephanie, contained subtle references to family traditions that pointedly excluded me. There were moments of doubt, particularly when Emma asked innocent questions about why seeing Grandma was so complicated. But through each challenge, we found strength in the boundaries we had established and the professional support we maintained. We learnt that family loyalty does not require accepting harmful behavior, that love sometimes means setting firm limits, and that healthy relationships cannot thrive in an atmosphere of manipulation and disrespect. As I reflect now on our journey, I recognize that healing is not a destination, but an ongoing process. Patricia may never fully relinquish her fantasy of a different outcome for her son, but she has learned to keep those thoughts private and to interact with our family in healthier ways. David continues to work through the complex legacy of being raised by a mother whose love came with conditions and expectations. And I have found a peace I never thought possible secure in my place in my family and no longer fighting an invisible competitor for my own marriage. If our story offers any wisdom to others facing similar challenges, it is this: boundaries are not walls but vital structures that make healthy love possible. Standing firm against toxic behavior is not selfish, but an act of care for everyone involved, including the person whose behavior you're limiting. And perhaps most importantly, your worth as a partner, parent, or family member is never contingent on another person's approval or acceptance. What about you? Have you ever had to establish difficult boundaries with family members who couldn't respect your relationship? How did you handle it, and what did you learn from the experience? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if our story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that they're not alone in facing these challenging family dynamics. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that protecting your peace is never something to apologize for.